member Wilson, and I'm here in the boardroom along with a number of support staff and guests. So I'm just going to ask everybody to go around the room and introduce themselves. Maybe starting, I'm going to call in the back corner for visitor.
Corey Ace, teacher and current Education Association president.
Jim Anderson, Chief Finance Officer.
Andy Ratliff, the Director of the Office Management and Budget.
Matt T-Third, Chief Human Resource Officer.
Jared Bryant, incoming superintendent.
Rob Hollins, Senior Director of Maintenance and Operations and Acting COO.
Eric Visty will be the Senior Director of Elementary Ed.
Matt Berman, I'm Professor of Economics at Institute of Social Economic Research at UAA. The team here, the masked intruders.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Dana DeFeo. I work also at UAA. I direct the Center for Alaska Education Policy Research, and I'm collaborating with Matt and with Mark on this project.
Mark Foster, retired, on a committee to support the group at the university.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here today. The staff to board member ratio is in your favor, but so thank you for taking the time. Really, I wanted to give our friends over at ICER the opportunity to talk about their new research, and we can talk about what the implications might be for ASD moving forward.
Good.
Any connections? So.
Sure. I put on this slide that we're reintroducing who we are because I think we've worked with some of you in the past and some people we haven't. And there's been a lot of leadership changes on our end, and we're emerging post-pandemic, so I thought it would be useful to reset who we are and what we're doing. Pardon me? So make the introductions, and should I? We made a presentation because we were told we had 10 minutes, but I think it's going to be pretty informal to just talk about who we are and what we're doing and how it might benefit ASD. So please just shout out and interrupt and ask questions, and we'll go from there. If that sounds all right.
That's great.
Advance slides. I might have advanced too far. So we're I see. It's just a slight delay. We're at the Institute of Social and Economic Research. We call ourselves ICER. We're at the University of Alaska Anchorage. And Matt, did you want to? Matt's been working with ICER a lot longer than I have to introduce who we are and what we do.
Oh, well, I always asked to say, well, what is ICER? That's a difficult question to ask and answer. We're the organized research university, organized research organization at the University of Alaska system that deals with public policy and social and economic research and social sciences. And so we do a lot of things. It's a broad mission and a big stake and relatively small. So we do a lot of things. And some of them are there on the board that show.
We recently made I don't know if we call this a pamphlet or a leaflet about who ICER is and what we do with more information. So I can just give those or even for you. We also have some information about this specific project. I've been at ICER for 7 or 8 years, and Matt's been there a little bit longer. So, but my role is to direct the Center for Alaska Education Policy Research. And so as our title might imply, I think we're very well known for the economic work that we do, but we also do a lot of other social science work. And so paper, the name of our center is Education Clearinghouse for all of the education related work done there. So I would characterize that we do work in 4 main areas. We look at career pathways, we look at STEM education, we look at rural education contexts, including Arctic education. And I think what this group might know us mostly for is our teacher turnover, supply, demand, compensation work. We do quite a bit of that. So we try and emphasize topics that are relevant for Alaskans, but we do research that's basic, applied, and we also do a fair amount of evaluation work related to different grants or implementation science type projects. that's who we are, and talk a little bit about our work. Does anybody care to hear about it? What we've been doing, what we've been up to lately? Okay.
You have the floor.
So I don't want to take up too much of your time. So we've been doing, just in terms of the things that we've talked about recently or that we've published or that we've testified on, and I think a lot of these do matter a lot to the school districts. We did a teacher salary study a couple of years ago where we calculated cost differentials for different school districts. We studied the economic value of tenure. Both of these were studies for the state legislature. We've looked at how much teacher turnover costs our state and how much we spend per pupil in the state of Alaska. We've looked at energy costs, we've looked at internet costs. We've done quite a bit with capital spending, dual enrollments. Everybody's asking us to look at COVID now. We don't have a lot of answers, but we're starting to look into that. And, you know, since Alaska, maybe not ASD, but Alaska is a very rural state, we do a lot looking at the differences in recruiting and retaining teachers in different school contexts. So these are things we've put out lately that I'm happy to talk about, but also we have some ongoing projects, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you today. We're studying a lot at higher ed. We're looking at a lot at STEM education, curriculum development in rural communities. We're looking at career aspirations and youth and more and more COVID rural stuff, career and technical stuff. But the project that we wanted to talk to you about was this last one, and the flyer goes with it, is really how compensation and working conditions are contributing to the teacher recruitment and retention challenges that we have in the state. And I know that Anchorage School District has its own unique challenges in this arena. And so about this project, we were funded, I guess it was last summer, 2021. So we came up with this project in 2020, building on some of the work that we had been doing, Matt and I, back in 2015 when we did the salary and tenure study. We were looking at teacher move patterns between different districts and wondering what we could learn by observing what teachers do. So we applied for this grant through the National Science Foundation. It's a Robert Noyce program, which is really focused on STEM educators, and they're really focused on high need schools. And so, you know, we were kind of really nicely set up. We had the experience doing this work. We have a really diverse state within which to study teacher move patterns, and this is also a big priority for the state. So we were lucky to get funded, and we wanted to let you know, because this work, we hope, not only would we like to do work that benefits your district, and we want to hear from you some ideas and thoughts about how we can communicate with you and what we need to keep our eyes on. But also, we want you to hear it from us first, and not, you know, it's something that we publish and talk about anywhere else. So we just wanted to be really transparent and open the line of communication around this project. So that is someone please say
Well,
something.
just to say, this is a small piece of a bigger problem. That's how research works, is based on improvements and understanding. So then we have next question after that, but this is mostly focused on STEM teachers and what encourages them to stay in a particular school, especially a high need school, rather than try to transfer to another school or even leave the teaching profession.
And I just want to let you know that Member Jacobs joined online.
Thank you.
And I can add that we were funded to look specifically at STEM teachers. That's what this program is for. What have I done? I think that we necessarily will look at STEM teachers in relation to other teaching assignments. I did something.
No. You're still projecting for those people in Zoom. I am not sure. I will work on it.
You know, they're just slides, no big deal. So I think we'll necessarily be looking at STEM teachers in comparison to other teaching assignments as part of it. So I think we'll capture everybody, even though the research really was intended to focus on STEM.
Yeah, programs focused on STEM teachers, but we're obviously going to be looking at how STEM teachers may be similar or different to other teachers in the same schools. And just overall trying to understand the influence of compensation and working conditions, the factors that may be associated with the teacher retention.
Let's have some fun, Matt, and talk about what you're measuring to characterize working conditions.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
that's the way to call it. Go ahead. Yeah, Jada, you probably have a slide on that.
so, let me, you talk, I'll find the slide.
Well, I mean, working conditions is how it's perceived by the teacher, basically. And so that involves things that we wouldn't necessarily associate with working conditions, but the teachers may be considering when they're either happy with this job they have or not. And so it can be anything from the support they get from parents that in school or the other teachers, the principal. It can include the students, characteristics of students. They're teaching in the classroom, and it could be the the building, the structure, facility. It's basically we have to ask the teachers. There's some things we can measure, but then there's other things we have to basically ask the teachers and the staff about what that is to them.
So is this qualitative?
Both qualitative and
Qualitative,
quantitative. Some of it can be quantified, but some of that, like, for example, how long the principal stays in the school that they're teaching, well, that can be quantified. But, what teachers perceive to be issues, that's qualitative.
All of a sudden, the slides that really weren't doing anything meaningful, like could be super useful now, but I
You don't see them, but you see them on your screen, so people on Zoom can see them.
people on Zoom can see them,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
So the way that we've got this set up is as a 3-part. I'm going to share for the Zoom people. Sorry for everybody else. I guess I can
Well,
try to turn this around.
small, but
It's small, but the research is, we intend for it to take place in 3 parts. So the first part will be a quantitative analysis, and we are working to capture a lot of things in that. The quantitative analysis will look at teacher move patterns over the last 10 or 15 years between teaching assignments.
yeah, both
Yeah.
how long they stay in their current position and where they go when they leave.
Yeah. So that'll look at, so for that, we've got all of the records from the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development. So we have the teaching assignments. Here we are. Here we go. And we'll match those data so we're looking at the state data of teacher employment records. We'll also be able to look at when teachers leave teaching. We'll be able to see if they left teaching for another job in private industry. We'll be able to look and see whether or not they stayed in the state of Alaska. We're also compiling collective bargaining agreements as part of that quantitative analysis to get a sense of what benefit packages teachers have in addition to the compensation that they receive. So all of that will be a part of that first step, which is that red box, this quantitative analysis, to really figure out for the things that we can readily observe and measure, how those predict teachers staying or leaving in a job.
And I
And then our-
just add, sorry to interrupt, but.
Yeah.
So we're looking statewide
Mhm.
because teachers are moving in and out of the Anchorage school district. And there's obviously differences in compensation and benefits, but there's also teachers moving within the Anchorage school district, and their working conditions may change from the school, but their salary and benefits are not changing. So that's one of the ways, it's important way of trying to isolate working conditions, because they're, school-based working conditions, they're community working conditions, living in the community, in the district conditions. So we need to be able to isolate what are the things that the school district can control, what are the things that the school principal or the school board, whatever, may be able to control, and what are the things that are sort of outside the district's control, like population of the community. Yeah, if it's hard to control, but there's no way in and out or whatever, so Anchorage has got some advantages there, obviously, but doesn't mean it's without challenges.
Our intent from that quantitative analysis is to identify the statistical outliers, the schools that our model says should have low STEM teacher retention, but for some reason the schools are outperforming what our model suggests. And we really want to go to those schools and find out what's happening there. What are they doing to, outside of what we're able to observe with all of the things that we measure to retain those teachers. And then we'll do qualitative case studies. Obviously, we don't know where because we need to find those high-performing schools. And then we'll use what we learned there to refine the quantitative model to the extent that we can. And hopefully this will give us a better understanding of the conditions that drive some of these teacher decisions. Because teachers vote with their feet. Where they want to be, they switch jobs, and we can identify the preferences there. To Matt's question about what variables we're looking at.
But I can say that we wish we could, it'd be nice to be able to look, when Dan talks about performing schools, it'd be nice to be able to look at school, performance of the students, but that's another question that's sort of outside our scope. When we say performing, we're talking about specifically about retaining STEM teachers more than other schools are that look similar.
President Bellamy has joined online and Member Higgins also.
Thank you.
Did this answer your question that you had posed now about what variables we're going to try and get? So
Could you speak to sort of scale and timeline as well?
sure.
Maybe I'm jumping the gun.
No, not at all, not
Okay.
at all. I mean, conversation is better. So in terms of scale, it'll be statewide. And so we're able to look at all teachers who've had jobs in the state of Alaska as certified teachers since 2010. I'm trying to remember.
Well,
Don't-
we have data back to like 2000, maybe a little earlier. So
Okay,
I know one of the issues is there's a number of issues on retention of teachers, but we have long time periods of data, so we can, but things have changed over that time period, so we have to be careful how we use it. So yeah, we have lots of data, but we're also the qualitative analysis there. We have to pick some actual schools to do more in-depth study, and maybe Dan can talk about how that process works, because I'm not involved in that.
to also talk about your certificated teachers, that's where I think the NSF, the National Science Foundation, really was excited about with this project is that there's been this sort of narrative that STEM teachers tend to have higher turnover because they can find better jobs in industry. And I've heard that said lots and lots of times, but I've never found a study that quantified it. So by partnering with Department of Labor, we'll be able to see whether these teachers stayed in state and took another job, and where they took that job and what they were being compensated in that job. And inversely, maybe people come from private industry into teaching. So we'll be able to actually look at some of those patterns and describe them, which I think is kind of nice. About the qualitative work, it's our intention to find about 4 schools and to do extended site visits there, talk to the teachers who work there, talk to the leadership, parents, kids, community members, and really try to uncover what it is about the teachers, their philosophy of education, what their aspirations and plans are, maybe characteristics about the environment itself, the perceptions of leadership, school community relationships, the things that we can't measure really nicely in the quantitative data sets, and also looking at the quality of instruction that's delivered at these schools. Because we want to not just retain any teacher, but really, really good teachers, really highly qualified teachers. And so the qualitative work will spend lots of time on site exploring that through a variety of methods and mechanisms. Please.
Yeah.
I have 2. Is this pre-K through 12?
No, I'm sorry, K-12, right?
Okay,
Any certificated teacher, and so the pre-K is not, I mean, they would be in there, but not
Well, we do
widely
have-
universal.
We do have preschool certified teachers,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
was wondering, those would be included?
They would be included.
They're included, but I don't believe they're
STEM,
STEM
Yeah.
teachers.
right?
So you have to have
Okay, so
a
it's
STEM
focused specifically on STEM.
Well, we're looking at all teachers,
we'll look
but
at them all.
they need to be schools that have STEM teachers in other words, for the comparison to be, work, so.
I guess I have a follow-up
Well,
question.
my second question, which I think you already answered, it's, you're not looking at counselors and other related services staff that are also supporting students in those environments.
No, but if they're teachers, I mean, if a teacher, if somebody's teaching in the classroom and they move and get a different assignment, like a librarian or something else that they can do, that we're looking at that too. See, it's the teacher, we're focusing on the teachers, so if a STEM teacher takes a different assignment, non-STEM assignment, we can look at that as well.
This is maybe a very basic question, but how is somebody classified as a STEM teacher? I can imagine in secondary, your biology teacher, but in elementary, you teach a little bit of everything. So are there,
Good point.
how are elementary teachers incorporated into this?
The elementary school teachers don't actually, I don't think if they're teaching math, I don't think they actually get a STEM class. It's the job assignment. So I think it's mostly going to be middle school and high school teachers. Unless it's specific, like a math resource teacher or something in elementary school. But
We do have a charter that's one of our optional schools. It's considered a STEM elementary. school.
Yeah, that maybe.
The extent to which that would apply.
So let's make a note of that.
Campbell STEM.
Campbell STEM, yes, I agree with that.
So, I mean, the way we have the data.
And, oh, sorry, another thing, is I think some of the gifted teachers, the night program, they count STEM. I'm not sure, but I know when my kid went through that school district in the night class, was pretty much a science class, science and engineering. It was very, I don't know. That's when you look at.
But we will have all of these teachers in the data set, and I think there's value in looking at the patterns of movement and retention and turnover for elementary teachers who might not be classified as STEM versus secondary teachers who are classified as STEM versus secondary teachers who are non-STEM. I think that if there's I think we want to look at the differences in their behaviors and patterns to see, are we really talking about a different class of teachers who have different needs, or could we do, are there things that all teachers seem to value when picking where to work?
Yeah, so would you like to see a little bit more about the forced case study schools?
I was just going to point out, we can talk about it offline. There's a couple others too. There's Willowall does Project Lead the Way. You might want to figure out whether that qualifies or not. There's also Eagle River School that's took some freedom to use a FTE position differently and does STEM things, robotics and some other things that all kids rotate through. So there's several examples that don't fit the complete mold that we could talk about offline.
Which one of our data sets you can identify the teachers?
Yeah.
Special programs in addition to the teaching assignments.
Did any of the, we just lost that screen. Did any of the board members online have a question?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
So, I think that with the, and that's, well, I think two of the four was the urban schools and two was the rural. That's it.
I don't know that we've established that yet. I think we were going to see what the model cranks out, and then we would be, when we propose this to the National Science Foundation, we obviously don't know who are going to be our statistical outlying schools. And so one of their questions are, how do we know as researchers that the school districts are going to want to participate and invite us to do case studies? And in our experience, which, I don't know how great the past predicts anything in the future nowadays, but in our experience, districts are generally happy to have researchers come and say, you're doing an exceptionally good job, and we'd like to explore why and how you're doing so well. So we're hoping to get some of those invitations. We expect that we'll find some statistical outliers. And I do think that since Alaska has such an interesting rural and urban context, it would be important to have representation in different community types, but we'll kind of just have to see what the model cranks out.
See what the data says.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. Do you have a sense of the timeline of when you expect different deliverables, or when you'll be done at different points, or when you'll have information to share?
So to go to where were we? This one that has the picture of what we're doing. We're not that one, not that one, not that one. Apologies. So we're in this red box now, the quantitative analysis. We spent the last year getting permission to do this work from a variety of different entities, which and these data are protected and confidential, and they should be, of course. So we've spent a lot of time working with Department of Ed, Labor, institutional review boards, NEA, because they've helped us gather collective bargaining agreements, all of that. So we're in the process of joining these data sets and running the preliminary quantitative models. And I'm going to skip to the slide that we put in the proposal that says when we were going to do it, when we thought we were going to do it, when we put this together in 2020. But our intention, so year one, we're sort of at this, the cursor showing up, we're at the end of year one now, and that's too small for you to read anyway. Our hope was that we would be doing the data analysis and modeling into the fall of 2022 and selecting our case study schools in the spring of 2023, and then visiting those schools, depending on the schools and what worked for them in the fall of 2023. We would have preliminary quantitative analyses to share. I'm talking and Matt should interrupt me because he's leading this part of the analysis. I'm gonna, maybe around the end of this calendar year, or is that exceedingly optimistic?
That's not optimistic, but we are working with the Department of Labor and they are short-staffed. A lot of people are. So if they can't, if their staff free that work with us, then it slips, but we would plan, that's our plan, our goal. And so far, the effective research there has been extremely helpful, supportive. So it supports the project and help have work. Because they have other statutory obligations, because they get all the data, they share the data with the federal government. So if we need this report by then, and we cut off the funding, they have to do it.
Great position, a great position as long as we hit no road bumps. Yeah, late fall, early spring. And that was one of the things we wanted to ask too, is how and when we should be communicating with this board and with the school district, so that you can not only know what we're up to, but hear the findings and if they're useful to you, apply them in some meaningful way.
Well, without having a chance to talk with the other board members, I think it would be, if you had information to share towards the end of this calendar year, maybe President Bellamy could schedule a work session before one of our school board meetings where we would have the opportunity to learn more about your insights at that point in time, whether that's November or December, or even early January, depending on our timeline.
Who's the person that would be best to just sort of keep in the loop, because I know you don't all want email from me every time we have a tiny development.
You're welcome. Leave for me.
Okay.
That would be fun. Is anybody else? I mean, is there information that the administration would value from this project that hasn't been delved into deeply yet?
I just want to express my enthusiasm. I think that the information gathered from this type of research could pay huge dividends for the district. The information that you're using, is that all publicly available, or do you think you need some sort of agreement with the district to?
So, great question. The quantitative, very little of the data are publicly available except for the collective bargaining agreements. So NEA is helping us to get those because they're scattered all over. So we've gathered those. And of course, community characteristics and the types of things that show up in school report cards. We can get all of that. Teacher employment records we're getting from DEED and Department of Labor data. We have a separate agreement with them. I think at this point we have the data that we know we need for the preliminary analysis, but in that analysis and in those case studies, if teachers start to talk about things, we might sort of brainstorm, well, where could we find another piece of data that represents this concept or serves as a good good proxy variable. And so at that point, we might come to the district and ask, do you have these data and could we work with you? We would try to negotiate at that time.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And of course, if we do find some case study opportunities in Anchorage, we would come to the district report to talk about that.
situation, and probably Corey Yates and AEA both might be interested in what your criteria and how you determine the quality of instruction. You said when you go into schools, you're looking for quality instruction. I guess we'd all be curious as to what that constitutes for a study.
Always the trickiest question. So, in this study, we won't be measuring that quantitatively. We'll be working, at least I don't think in our initial analysis.
We never know, when research, you never know what you're gonna find, but we're not finding, we're not expecting that.
If I understand correctly, when you say high performing schools, you're looking at campuses that have high retention rates for the STEM. So that's the criteria of excellence in this case, right?
Yeah, that's the starting point, yes, yeah. Want to find out why they were able to do that. And the answer is, well, the teachers there are, quality of instruction is good, that's another answer. But
I'll look forward to following up with Assistant Superintendent Stock about the high performing schools and see if we have an overlap. And map it, just see how it looks like. It's a very interesting question.
Schools, our hope is to be able to attend some STEM classes and watch some of these educators in action, looking at the facilities that they have available, looking at the technology that they have available. So it's the instruction that the teacher delivers with the tools they've got, but also the tools they've got and allows the teachers and principals to help us understand that dynamic better. Measuring it is just to be legit as
Member Jacobs has his hand up.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Member Jacobs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to chime in and say that I appreciate the kind of the update on the study that's being planned. It'll be interesting to see to what extent the two analyses overlap with what DEED did last year. I think they published an action plan regarding recruitment and retention. Some of the steps have already been accomplished. I was curious if maybe anyone else, just maybe an idea, Madam Chair, to think about if this data and kind of updates on the progress can be tied into our report that we'll be getting on our second guardrail that involves staff, and to what extent the recruitment and retention dovetails with that. So just an idea as to how we can loop that into our board meetings. Thank you.
That's a great idea, Member Jacobs. I'm looking at the calendar. When is that guardrail?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I mean, I do thank the team for coming and giving us this information. It's great information. I'm feeling a little disjointed because the board has not had an opportunity to fully, as a group, to get together to discuss this. So I'm a little resistant to connecting and scheduling anything until the board has had an ample opportunity to understand, not just, I think those who are present understand what we're trying to do, but how does it fit? It may fit with our goals and guardrails, and it may not. So I don't necessarily want to, without further input and direction from the board, I don't want us to overstep or I'm just having a little bit of I'm just having some issue, some problems trying to figure out going forward. I think that's a board decision. It's not a committee decision.
Okay, you broke up a little bit, but I think that what I heard was that you'd like the board to discuss this further.
Yes, and I think a work session with the board and time for the board to fully understand all of the pieces. I was a little late getting on. I think I have the gist of, and I think it's going to be, this is good work. That's not the issue. The issue is we have a new superintendent coming on board. We have things that are already in the fire. We've got to figure out how to balance all of that and then fully understand what is our benefit for participating in this study. And what are we asking staff to do? I just don't think we can make a decision to make it part of our practice today. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah. So first, about the DEAN action plan, about the teacher turnover work group, we're a part of that. They've ordered, I think, 5 or 7 other studies that we may or may not be conducting at ICER in relation. So we're, to Carl's point, in pretty good contact with Barb Adams and all of the people leading that group. So I could talk more about how it overlaps, but we're finding that we might be able to respond to some of those legislatively mandated studies as well with some of this research. And I also do appreciate that teachers and principals and schools that you've been kind of cooked over the last couple of years with so much on your plate. And so what I should have said earlier on in this presentation is we're not asking anything of you at this time, no data, no, I think we'd like to just be transparent about what we're doing. We'd like to invite you to participate in case studies, maybe in a year or two, if the data yields some schools in Anchorage that we should look into, but there's no obligation on your part. We hope that we can be useful, but not burdensome. But I do truly appreciate and want to express my respect for the fact that schools and principals and teachers are being asked to do a tremendous amount right now, and we don't want to add to the burden. So we'll negotiate that with your direction when the time comes, for sure. And thank you for that.
Yeah, and right at the, until we get to the second stage, there's really no, I don't think there should be any burden on the school district. You don't need to do anything if we have the data that we need.
Great.
Right now.
Can I ask, at the end of this 4-year plan, do you anticipate that the information would give direction towards state level funding, advocacy efforts, give us talking points for how to speak with legislators, the governor, if we're ultimately talking about conditions? I mean, if everything has a price, right? Does it come, will information from your study, would it give ASD information that would allow us to perhaps more adequately fund the district's operations?
I would say a lot of our research, I hope, has been good information that ASD could use to advocate or ask for funding. Of course, we don't control the funding that gets attached onto it, but our hope is that it would have very actionable recommendations for funding, but also maybe for practice, for ways that to structure compensation packages in ways that are more effective. But I can't imagine that it wouldn't have some suggestion that more funding is needed. That's what our research often shows. But we would want to work with you to understand what it says so that you could advocate. We're not able to really say that we're going to influence policy. Did I say that?
Yeah, I think that's true. We aren't, our intent isn't to influence policy, but provide information that you can use for that. And of course, we know that and certainly in Anchorage, most districts in Alaska, the salary compensation, a lot of benefits about working conditions are part of the bargaining process. And so obviously both sides of that will have the same information, and some of it you may end up having to go, ask for more funding but that's we aren't trying to predict any of that. We just want to have the information out there that's relevant to what you need to do.
testify with our study findings. And so we're frequently asked a couple of times every year to go down and explain our study findings to the legislature. And I would hope that they would invite something around this analysis. Of course, we don't have control over it. So I'd like to think that they influence decision making. I don't always see it.
Yeah, I
In
expect,
practice.
I expect that they will.
Yeah.
But it's going to be another legislature.
We have met with Commissioner Johnson, although, Commissioner Johnson and several of the House and Senate Education Committee members are aware that the study is going on. So that's good to know. They've asked for updates.
Yes, at least one will be back. And Stewart is one of the people who's not running unopposed will probably be still there on the have something to share.
Any more questions from board members or staff in attendance?
Has there been any talk, somewhat related about the district cost factors, the study you guys did in like 2004, and how that's, the last 20 years has changed a lot with relation to how much it costs for different items in different districts. Has there any been talk about updating that study recently?
Yes.
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 On a couple of fronts, I don't know who should take this one.
Go ahead.
When did we testify? I think it was in March or so. April, it's been brought up several times that, the district cost factors were calculated a long time ago. A lot of things have changed. There was the bill to, we testified around inflation proofing effectively some of these things. I know that it's been brought up as something that needs to be redone by several legislators. And so I think our position, and I'm speaking for ICER, which is way out of my league, but is that we can calculate them, but the request to calculate them needs to come from the legislature who can actually act on implementing them. And so some of the work in 2015, when we did the teacher salary schedule, a lot of the same data that would go into those district cost factor calculations was used in that 2015 study. And at the time we thought, hey, it wouldn't be that much to update it because we've done 70% of the work. That was also in 2015. So I wouldn't make that same argument now. I'd say we need to redo all of that work. But you can look at those 2015 numbers and they're only looking at teacher compensation, but I think that they sort of show how those district cost factors would probably shake out, or at least they could predict a little bit there. So they've talked about it. I've heard it brought up in many different discussions that they need to be redone. And if there's a bid or if they ask for an RFP, we'll bid on it. What's that?
I think we may want to consider a white paper to LB&A between now and November. So we can get a little foundation laid for a subsequent study on the district cost factors. And I think the chair of LB&A might be open to that suggestion.
Well, to that, well, teacher compensation is a large part of the cost. It's many of the rural schools are really hurting with energy costs, and that's obviously now even more of a problem. So we have to. That's sort of a reason for why the whole thing needs to be redone. But I just need to point out here as an economist that unless the legislature increases the funding, it's sort of a zero-sum kind of exercise. So one district more, another has to get less unless the funding is increased. That's obviously a reason for putting it off, because no one wants to deal with it. I mean, to not be able to hold people harmless if it says you're cheaper than you were. That's a disincentive to making a disincentive for making efficiency increases because then you lose funding. So it's a difficult exercise.
All right, Matt, I'll go ahead and play. Let me hit the ball back.
Okay. Hit the ball back.
Look at the oil futures market and compare it to the past 10 years oil futures market. This is the best time to take a run at it that we've had in decades. Remember the price spike we had in 2008, we had a good run, opportunity. Prices went down by basically December, January. This run's gonna last longer. This is our opening. We should take it.
They last longer, we hope.
I'm just looking at the market. Let the market tell me where it's going. And that's based on that. This is the opportunity. So I think we should all collectively consider that.
If I could add to, and Mark, you were a big part of this, was it HB 278 in 2015 that called for an adequacy study? And that was never completed. So there was call for an adequacy study. My understanding is that no one bid on it, largely because of the timeline, and I don't know what they were offering either. But ASD did an adequacy study with Larry Pikus, who we probably would see bidding on that if it were to go up again. And so in addition to these cost factor calculations, geographic cost factor calculations is an adequacy study to figure out how big that pot should be. And then the cost factor just figures out how to divvy it up fairly amongst all of the districts once the amount has been determined. But the adequacy study would truly help to ensure that we're starting with the right size bucket to divide up. So I think there's sort of a two-pronged approach if we're looking at it. Let's step a little bit further back.
Good luck.
Cynics are not allowed.
So,
Realists or cynicism. Realists, yes.
So I know that we've stayed for longer than our 10 minutes.
Thank you very much.
What's that?
I want to thank everyone for their time and effort in this
Thanks,
area.
everyone. Well, and I can argue outside.
Do you have good contact information in case there are follow-up questions from any board members or?
Yes, it should be
Should
on
on
the
your-
sheet,
on our
but
handout?
also there's Dana and Matt, there's our website. So all of the studies that we do are available for free on our website. So you can take a look or, email me directly and I can send you direct links. We really do want to be in touch, and that was, I don't want to go away from the contact info slide, but we're working with AXA, we're working with NEA to try and think of where else we need to communicate statewide. We'll update the website, we'll stay in touch with Kelly, but if you have suggestions too for how we can communicate most effectively with you all, because we want to do good work and we want your input to do good work, but then we hope our good work is useful and we want to share that good work. So any input that you have, we're really most happy to hear. Again, that's us.
President Bellamy, that's right.
Okay, President Bellamy, go ahead, please.
Oh, yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank Dana, and is it Matt? Who is it? Dana, who is there with?
Yes.
Just thank you very much for coming.
It's not.
I'm intrigued. I'm glad AASB is on your list. So I know we'll be having more conversations there. And I'd like to set up I'll be in touch through the chair to set up a work session sometime in the fall. I can't project, but we will be in touch for sure. So thank you for coming.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. We're local, we're here, available for anytime.
Yep.
Thank you so much for a wonderful overview to an important project.
Thank you.
And I'm excited for you. I'm excited for us. I'm excited for teachers and students across the state.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to turn to more of a nuts and bolts for other committee members and just propose finance meeting days and times for the upcoming year. And maybe this is also a question for Jim and Andy. Does the last Wednesday at noon, oh no, I'm sorry, that's from governance meeting. But is it the second Wednesday around noon, sort of August through for the school year? Does that work for you guys?
Yeah.
That would work. How about Dora? And Pat, are you online too?
That should work for me, Kelly.
That will work. Okay, well, let me double check with with Member Higgins about whether a noon meeting would work for him, just for recurring meetings, and then we'll connect with Jim and Andy. Okay, all right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you so much.